Hello guys, and welcome to one of my videos again. So if you're not familiar with the presidential race, you've been living under a rock, or you just don't give a fuck about the election, which you live in a better world than the rest of us do. But there was a news story that was written about Hillary Clinton. I should say a magazine article written about Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton back in this month on the 10th. So from the 17th to the 10th, so literally a week ago. Over a week ago, this article was written. And I'm going to read you the whole article. It's a little lengthy, but it just shows how disgusting Bill and Hillary Clinton are. Really, just shows how disgusting they are. I mean, racistly disgusting. Not disgusting as in, what, Bill Clinton eats his own shit? Disgusting? No, nothing like that. No, I mean disgusting in racially. So, I'm gonna, I'm gonna stop the music right now. And after I read you the article, I'll give you what I think of the article of Bill and Hillary Clinton. Because I read it earlier, and I have opinions already. But I'll let you know what I think about them after I read you the article. So, we're gonna behold to the music. Okay, let's get to the article. And this will piss anyone off who's Republican or Democrat and who's a decent human being. This is written by Michelle Alexander, who is the lead black correspondent for The Nation, which is a magazine. And the article is entitled, Why Hillary Clinton Doesn't Deserve the Black Vote. From the crime bill to welfare reform policies Bill Clinton enacted and Hillary Clinton supported. Decimated Black America by Michelle Alexander. Now, I'm human. I have trouble pronouncing some words, so give me a break if I ever have a thing like that going in this video. Okay, let's begin. Hillary Clinton loves black people, and black people love Hillary, or so it seems. Black politicians have lined up in droves to endorse her, eager to prove their loyalty to the Clintons in the hopes that their faithfulness will be remembered and rewarded. Black pastors are opening their church doors, and the Clintons are making themselves comfortably at home once again, engaging effortlessly in all the usual rituals associated with courting the black vote, a pursuit that typically begins and ends with the Democratic politicians making black people feel liked and taken seriously. Doing something concrete to improve the conditions under which most black people live is generally not required. Hillary is looking to gain momentum on the campaign trail as primaries move out of Iowa and New Hampshire and into states like South Carolina, where large pockets of black voters can be found. According to some polls, she leads Bernie Sanders by as much as 60% among African Americans. It seems that we black people are her winning card, one that Hillary is eager to play. And it seems we're eager to get played again. The love affair between black folks and the Clintons have been going on for a long time. It It began back in 1992 when Bill Clinton was running for president. He threw on some shades and played the saxophone on the Arsenio Hall show. It seemed silly in retrospect, but to many of us, we fell for that. At the time when a popular slogan was, "It's a black thing you wouldn't understand," Bill Clinton seemed to get us. When Toni Morrison dubbed him our first black president, we nodded our heads. We had our boy in the White House, or at least we thought we did. Black voters have been remarkably loyal to the Clintons for more than 25 years. It's true that we eventually lined up behind Barack Obama in 2008, but it's a measure of the Clintons' allure that Hillary led Obama among black voters until he started winning caucuses and primaries. Now Hillary is running again. This time she's facing a democratic socialist who promises a political revolution that will bring universal health care, a living wage, an end to rampant Wall Street greed, and the dismantling of the vast prison state. Many of the same goals that Martin Luther King Jr. championed at the end of his life. Even so, black folks are sticking with the Clinton brand. What have the Clintons done to earn such devotion? Did they take extreme political risk to defend the rights of African Americans? Did they courageously stand up to the right-wing demagoguery about black communities? Did they help usher in a new era of hope and prosperity for neighborhoods devastated by deindustrialization, globalization, and the disappearance of work? No, quite the opposite. When Bill Clinton ran for president in 1992, urban black communities across America were suffering from the economic collapse. Hundreds of thousands of manufacturing jobs had vanished as factories moved overseas in search of cheaper labor, a new plantation. Globalization and deindustrialization affected workers of all colors but hit African Americans particularly hard. Unemployment rates among young black men had quadrupled as the rate of industrial employment plummeted. Crime rates spiked in the inner city communities that had been dependent on factory work, while hopelessness, despair, and crack addiction swept neighborhoods that had once been solidly working class. Millions of black folks, many of whom fled Jim Crow segregation in the South with the hope of obtaining decent work in northern factories, were suddenly trapped in racial segregated, jobless ghettos. On the campaign trail, Bill Clinton made the economy his top priority and argued persuasively that conservatives were using race to divide the nation and divert attention from the failed economy. In practice, however, he captivated entirely the right-wing black backlash against the civil rights movement and embraced former President Ronald Reagan's agenda on race, crime, welfare, and taxes, ultimately doing more harm to black communities than Ronald Reagan ever did. We should have seen it coming. Back then, Clinton was the standard bearer for the New Democrats, a group that firmly believed the only way to win back the millions of white voters in the South who had defected to the Republican Party was to adopt the right-wing narrative that black communities ought to be disciplined with harsh punishments rather than coddled with welfare. Reagan had won the presidency by dog whistling to poor and working class whites with coded racial appeals, railing against welfare queens and criminal predators and condemning big government. Clinton aimed to win them back, vowing that he would never permit any Republican to be perceived as tougher on crime than he. Okay, before I continue, you might want to hold on to something because this gets really immorally disgusting. Just be aware and hold on to something because this is really a sick thing that Bill Clinton did. Just weeks before the critical New Hampshire primary, Clinton proved his toughness by flying back to Arkansas to oversee the execution of Ricky Ray Rector, a mentally impaired black man who had so little conception of what was about to happen to him that he asked for the dessert from his last meal to be served to him later. After the execution, Clinton remarked, quote, "I can be nicked a lot, but no one can say I'm soft on crime," unquote. Before I continue again, that's just disgusting. Doesn't matter if someone is on death row who's black or white. It doesn't matter. If they have no idea that you are going to be executed, and you don't, and you treat them like they know why they're on death row, that's just immoral. Really fucking immoral. Anyway, I'm continuing. Clinton mastered the art of sending mixed cultural messages, appealing to African Americans by belting out, quote, "lift every voice and sing," unquote, in black churches, while at the same time signaling to poor and working class whites that he was willing to be tougher on black communities than Republicans had been. Clinton was praised for his no-nonsense, pragmatic approach to racial policies. He won the election and appointed a racially diverse cabinet that looked like America. He won re-election 4 years later, and the American economy rebounded. Democrats cheered. The Democratic Party was saved. The Clintons won. Guess who lost? Bill Clinton presided over the largest increase in federal and state prison inmates of any president in American history. Clinton did not declare the war on crime or the war on drugs. Those wars were declared before Reagan was elected and long before crack hit the streets. But he escalated it beyond what many conservatives had imagined possible. He supported the 100-to-1 sentencing disparity for crack versus powder cocaine, which produced staggering racial injustice in sentencing and boosted funding for drug law enforcement. Clinton hold on. Where was I? Oh, yeah. Clinton championed the idea of a federal three strikes law in his 1994 State of the Union address, and months later signed a $30 billion crime bill that created dozens of new federal capital crimes, mandated life sentences for some 3-time offenders, and authorized more than $16 billion for state prison grants and expansion of police forces. The legislation was hailed by mainstream media outlets as a victory for the Democrats, who, quote, were able to risk the crime issue from the Republicans and make it their own, unquote. When Clinton left office in 2001, the United States had the highest rate of incarceration in the world. Human Rights Watch reported that in 7 states, African Americans consisted 80 to 90% of all drug offenders sent to prison, even though they were no more likely than whites to use or sell illegal drugs. Prison admissions for drug offenses reached a level in 2000 for African Americans more than 26 times the level in 1983. All of the presidents since 1980 have contributed to mass incarceration, but as Equal Justice Infinite founder Brian Stevenson recently observed, quote, President Clinton's tenure was the worst, unquote. Some might argue that it's unfair to judge Hilary Clinton for her policies her husband championed years ago, but Hilary wasn't picking out China while she was First Lady. She bravely broke the mold and redefined the job in ways no woman ever had before. She not only championed for Bill, she also wielded power and significant influence once he was elected, lobbying for legislation and other measures. That record and her statements from that era should be scrutinized. In her support for the 1994 crime bill, for example, she racially coded rhetoric to cast black children as animals. Quote, they are not just gangs of kids anymore, she said. They are often the kinds of kids that are called super predators, no conscience, no empathy. We can talk about why they ended up that way, but first we must make them heal, unquote. Both Clintons now express regret over the crime bill, and Hillary says she supports criminal justice reforms to undo some of the damage that was done by her husband's administration. But on the campaign trail, she continues to invoke the economy and country that Bill Clinton left behind as a legacy she would continue. So what exactly did the Clinton economy look like for Black Americans? Taking a hard look at this recent past is about more than just the choice between the two candidates. It's about whether the Democratic Party can finally reckon with its policies, what its policies done to African American communities, and whether it can redeem itself and rightly earn the loyalty of Black voters. An oft-repeated myth about the Clinton administration is that although it was overly tough on crime back in the 1990s, at least its policies were good for the economy and for Black unemployment rates. The truth is more troubling. As unemployment rates sank to historical lows for white Americans in the 1990s, the jobless rate amongst Black men in their 20s who didn't even have a college degree rose to the highest level ever. The increase in joblessness was propelled by the skyrocketing incarceration rate. Why is this not common knowledge? Because government statistics like poverty and unemployment rates do not include incarcerated people. As Harvard sociologist Bruce Western explains, much of the optimism about declines in racial inequality and the power of the U.S. model in economic growth is misplaced once we account for the invisible poor behind the walls of Americans' prisons and jails. When Clinton left office in 2001, the true jobless rate for young, non-college educated black men, including those behind bars, was 42%. This figure was never reported. Instead, the media claimed that the unemployment rates for African Americans had fallen to record lows, neglecting to mention that this miracle was only possible because incarceration rates were now at record highs. Young black men who weren't looking for work at high rates during Clinton era because they were now behind bars. Out of sight, out of mind, and no longer counted in poverty and unemployment statistics. I just want to say to those who are still watching this, who aren't, saying, "Why are you being mean to Hillary?" Those people who clicked off the video don't want to know the whole truth. But if you're still sticking around, bless you. I mean it, because you're trying to listen to reason, and I just want to take a little break from reading, because it is such a horrible thing that the Clintons did to black Americans. Anyway, I'm continuing. To make matters worse, the federal safety net for the poor families was torn to shreds by the Clinton administration and its efforts to end welfare as we know it. In his 1996 State of the Union address, given during his re-election campaign, Clinton declared that the era of big government is over, and immediately sought to prove by dismantling the federal welfare system as aid to families with dependent children, AFDC, which was a program which was started under Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And that's on the article, that I'm just adding that to the factors here. Continuing with the article. The welfare reform legislation that he signed with Hillary Clinton ardently supported then and characterized by a success as recently as 2008, replaced the federal safety net with a block grant to the states, imposed a 5-year lifetime limit on welfare assistance, added work requirements, barred undocumented immigrants from licensed professions, and slashed overall public welfare by $54 billion. Some was later restored. Experts and pundits disagree about the true impact of welfare reform. But one thing seems clear. Extreme poverty doubled to 1.5 million in the decade and a half after the law was passed. What is extreme poverty? U.S. households are considered to be in extreme poverty if they are surviving on cash incomes of no more than $2 per person a day in any given month. We tend to think of extreme poverty existing in third world countries, but here in the United States, shockingly, numbers of people are struggling to survive on less money per month than many families spend in one evening dining out. Currently, the United States is the richest nation on the planet and has the highest child poverty rates in the developed world. Despite claims that racial charges in crime and welfare policies were driven by a desire to end big government and save taxpayer dollars, the reality is that the Clinton administration didn't reduce the amount of money devoted to the management of the urban poor. It changed what the funds would be used for. Billions of dollars were slashed from public housing and child welfare budgets and transferred to the mass incarceration machine. By 1996, the penal budget was twice the amount that had been allocated to food stamps during Clinton's tenure. Funding for public housing was slashed by $17 billion, a reduction of 61%, while funding for corrections was boosted by $19 billion, an increase of 171%. According to sociologist Loic Waquen, quote, effectively making the construction of prisons the nation's main housing program for the urban poor, unquote. Bill Clinton championed discriminatory laws against formerly incarcerated people that have kept millions of Americans locked in a cycle of poverty and desperation. The Clinton administration eliminated Pell Grants for prisoners seeking higher education to prepare for their release, supported laws denying where was I? Oh yeah. Supported laws denying federal financial aid to students with drug convictions and signed legislation imposing a lifetime ban on welfare and food stamps for anyone convicted of a felony, drug offense, and exceptionally harsh provision given the racially biased drug war that was raging in the inner cities. I'm going to take a quick break. I'll be right back. Okay, let's continue on with the article. Perhaps most alarming, Clinton almost made it easier for public housing agencies to deny shelter to anyone with any sort of criminal history, even an arrest without conviction. and championed the One Strike and You're Out initiative, which meant that families could be evicted from public housing because one member or a guest had committed even a minor offense. People released from prison with no money, no job, and nowhere to go could no longer return home to their loved ones living in federally assisted housing without placing the entire family at risk of eviction. Purging the criminal element from the public housing played well on the evening news with no provisions were made for the people and families as they were forced out on the streets. By the end of Clinton's presidency, more than half of working age African American men in large urban areas were saddled with criminal records and subject to legalized discrimination in employment, housing, access to education, and basic public benefits, regulated to a permanent second-class status eerily reminiscent of Jim Crow. It is difficult to overstate the damage that's been done. Generations have been lost to the prison systems. Countless families have been torn apart or rendered homeless, and a school-to-prison pipeline has been born that shuttles young people from their decrepit, underfunded schools to brand new high-tech prisons. It didn't have to be like this. As a nation, we had a choice. Rather than spending billions of dollars constructing a vast new penal system, those billions could have been spent on putting young people to work in inner city communities and investing in their schools so they might have some hope of making the transition from an industrial to a service-based economy. Constructive interventions would have been good not only for African Americans trapped in ghettos, but for blue-collar workers of all colors. At the very least, Democrats could have fought to prevent the further destruction of black communities rather than ratcheting up the wars declared on them. Of course, it can be said that it's unfair to criticize the Clintons for punishing black people so harshly, given that many black people were on board with the Get Tough movement too. It's obviously true that black communities back then were in a state of crisis and that many black activists and politicians were desperate to get violent offenders off the streets. What is often missed, however, is the most of those black activists and politicians weren't asking only for toughness, but they were also demanding investment in their schools, better housing, job programs for young people, economic stimulus packages, drug treatment on demand, and better access to health care. In the end, they wound up with police and prisons. To say that this was what black people wanted is misleading at best. To be fair, the Clintons now feel bad about how their policies and politics have worked out for black people. Bill says he overshot the mark with his crime policies, and Hilary has put forth a plan to ban racial profiling, eliminate the sentencing disparities between crack and cocaine, and abolish private prisons, among other measures. And I just have to stop here real quick. First of all, Bill Clinton, I'm talking to you now. Why the fuck would you say you overshot the mark? First of all, you know what? It's great that you feel guilty about what you did to Black Americans, but what isn't great, Bill, is the fact that you tried to apologize by saying you overshot the mark. No, you didn't overshoot the mark. You on purposely, racially discriminated against Black Americans and pander to the right-wing propaganda that all Black Americans are criminals. That's what you did. And Hilary, stop saying you have a plan to stop racially profiling and eliminate the censoring and all that and abolish. If you had those plans, Hilary, you would be in favor of breaking the Big Bang, ending private prisons, which you haven't said anything about so far in this election. Anyway, and continuing. But what about a larger agenda that would not just reserve some of the policies adopted during the Clinton era, but would rebuild the communities decimated by them? If you listen closely here, you'll notice that Hillary Clinton is still singing the same old tune in a slightly different key. She is arguing that we ought to be seduced by Bernie's rhetoric because we must be pragmatic, face political realities, and not get tempted to believe that we can fight for economic justice and win. When politicians start telling you that it is unrealistic to support candidates who want to build a movement for greater equality, fair wages, universal health care, and an end to corporate control of our political system, it is best to leave the room. This is not an endorsement for Bernie Sanders, who, after all, supported the 1994 crime bill. That part annoys me, and I'll tell you why at the end. I also tend to agree that Ta-Nehisi quotes that the way the Sanders campaign handled the question of reparations is one of the many signs that Bernie doesn't quite get what's at stake in serious dialogues about racial justice. He was wrong to dismiss reparations as device, as though centuries of slavery, segregation, discrimination, ghettoization, and stigmatization aren't worthy of any specific acknowledgement or remedy. Okay. Like I said, that part annoys me, that Bernie Sanders supported that bill, and I'll tell you at the end of the article, I'll tell you why that annoys me. But recognizing that Bernie, like Hillary, has blurry vision when it comes to race is not the same thing as saying their views are equally problematic. Sanders opposed the 1996 welfare reform law. He also opposed bank deregulation and the Iraq War, both of which Hillary supported and both of which have proved disastrous. In short, there are such a thing as a lesser evil, and Hillary is not it. The biggest problem with Bernie in the end is that he's running as a Democrat, as a member of a political party that not only captivated the right-wing demagoguery, but is now owned and controlled by a relatively small number of millionaires and billionaires. Yes, Sanders has raised millions from small donors, but should he become president, he would also become part of what he has otherwise derided as the establishment. even if Bernie's racial justice views evolve, I hold little hope that a political revolution will occur within the Democratic Party without a sustained outside movement forcing truly transformational change. I am inclined to believe that it would be easier to build a new party than to save the Democratic Party from itself. Of course, the idea of building a new political party terrifies most progressives who understandably fear that if it would open the door for a right-wing extremist to get elected. So we play the game of lesser evils. This game has gone on for decades. W.E.B. Du Bois, the eminent, the eminent scholar and co-founder of the NAACP, shocked many when he refused to play along with the game in the 1956 election, defending his refusal to vote on the grounds that there is but one evil party with two names, and it will be elected despite all I say or do. While the true losers and winners of this game are highly predictable, the game of lesser evils makes for great entertainment and can now be viewed 24 hours a day on cable news networks. Hilary believes that she can win this game in 2016 because this time she's got us, the black vote, in her back pocket, her lucky card. She may be surprised to discover that the younger generation no longer wants to play her game. Or maybe not. Maybe we'll all continue to play along and pretend that we don't know how it will turn out in the end. Hopefully, one day, we'll muster the courage to join together in a revolutionary movement with people of all colors who believe that basic human rights and economic, racial, and gender justice are not unreasonable, pie-in-the-sky goals. After decades of getting played, the sleeping giant just might awake, stretch its limbs, and tell both parties, game over, move aside, it's time to reshuffle the deck. A lot to take in, I get that, but however, the facts need to get out there. And it annoys me that Bernie Sanders supported that bill. Because Bernie Sanders, in the 1960s, organized a sit-in in Chicago and in the South, and got arrested for it because he wanted to end segregation. But come 1994, almost 30 years, a little over 30 years after the Civil Rights Movement happened, he votes for this crime bill which added to the incarceration of tons of Black Americans. That really annoys me. That's a skeleton that was probably going to come out, but that really annoys me that Bernie Sanders supported that bill. But thank heavens he was opposed to the welfare reform bill and the deregulation of the banks in the Iraq War, which is a big thing. Now, to play the music, and I'll tell you what I think of Bill and Hillary Clinton now. Now, I think these are two racist racist people. Racist. Not just, bad people who've done a good thing, but no. Fucking racist. They are racist. I have no respect for Bill Clinton anymore, and I have no respect for Hillary Clinton. I have no respect for them. I just can't respect them. People who would do that to black Americans? Fuck no. See ya, guys. Share this video with people who are still supporting Hillary so they know the facts. If they want to still support her, bless them, but if they don't, they'll know because of this article. I'll link it in the description box below. See ya, guys.